Oh, hi there, and welcome to my 10.1.7 introductionary guide to Devastation Evoker. The stat you want to look for in general is item level, of course, for intellect, and then its mastery, which is Giant Killer. Basically, it's a increase to all damage we deal based on our target's current health. This scales linearly, so at a target with 50% HP, we will only do what would be half of your mastery as increased damage, right? So it can never have negative value. Another thing about mastery and why it's important is that during our cooldown, Dragon Rage, we benefit fully from mastery regardless of the target's HP. The second highest stat you want to go for is Critical Strike, and then you have Haste as your third stat, which at lower item levels is often better than crit, simply because then you're able to do more casts, which overall does more damage than if one of those casts would have crit. Versatility is generally something you want to avoid, simply because it's more so for defensiveness rather than actual damage. Now, with that being said, it is highly recommended that you always sim your character via raid bots in order to fully optimize your damage. But as a general rule of thumb, it is mastery, crit, and then haste. Let's go over the talents. All talents will be linked down below. However, for a simple overview, I have gathered 5 builds that I feel are a good starting point for any new Devastation Evokers. So we have a raid general build where we are focusing on being able to do single target while adds are present, but our primary focus is still single target. In a pure single target scenario in raiding, you would just swap Eternity Span over to Honed Aggression, as we don't need the additional targets to be hit with Eternity Span and pure single target, so getting 5% additional damage on our filler would make sense. Now, I have included this Pyre only build. This is only really usable in a fight where you have 3 or more targets at all times stacked close together with very low movement. The reason for low movement is because of Firestorm. Firestorm is an area of effect on the ground, so if you have to move a lot or the bosses move a lot and they move out of your Firestorm, you kind of nullify the whole idea of this build. However, it could definitely be useful in very specific encounters. Now, for M+ in general, it looks very similar to the general build. The main difference is that we reduce the cooldown of our interrupt and we pick up volatility rather than going down our engulfing blaze. Now, this isn't the only version you can play with. You can also play with what is known as the Charged Blast build, where we pick up Charged Blast rather than Burnout. This makes it so that we can use our Assure Strike, one of our 2 fillers, and increasing the damage of our next Pyre. This also means that we will almost never use Living Flame unless in pure single target situations. But yeah, as I mentioned, all talents will be linked down below. So for a complete baseline, what's the absolutely fundamentals of playing Devastation? Well, of course, it's using your cooldown as often as possible, but outside of your cooldowns, you want to maintain Fire Breath at a rank 1 because you want this debuff right here, Fire Breath, to be up pretty much 100% of the time. You want to use Fire Breath on cooldown, and depending on the situation, you will then rank it up if need be. I will explain more about that because that's more for AoE situations. Then you want to use Shattering Star. This generates what is known as an Essence Burst, which is just a free use of our essences, which can be very nice. It also amplifies our damage for 4 seconds by 20%. You will try to line this up, the Shattering Star, with Eternity Surge as often as possible. Otherwise, you would use Disintegrate in a single target situation. So once again, keep the Fire Breath out, Shattering Star into an Eternity Surge, rank 1, and then basically in single target you want to spend your Essence Burst and your Essences on Disintegrate, while in AoE you will be using them on Pyre. And that's actually the baseline of this spec. That's the absolutely fundamentals of it. Keep your Flame Breath off, use Shattering Star with Eternity Surge and Disintegrate. You will use Eternity Surge on cooldown. Outside of that, you have your Living Flame and your Assure Strike. Basically, it's a very simple concept. Living Flame, pure single target. Assure Strike if you can hit 3 enemies. That's the absolutely fundamental basics of Devastation. Now, let's talk a little bit about cooldown usage. Dragon Rage, because using Dragon Rage on pull when the boss is at 100% or 98%, you don't really benefit a whole lot from it outside of the additional Essence Burst chances and the Pyre will fire off when you use it. There are a lot of ways you can optimize your Dragon Rage usage, and it will all depend on your specific raid composition and the overall raid damage you can do. As a general rule of thumb, if you use Bloodlust on pull, Dragon Rage will always be used during Bloodlust, even if you lose out on, let's say, the first 3 seconds of the amplified damage from Dragon Rage. So the simple target opener for Devastation Evoker is you want to precast a Living Flame into a Verdant Embrace. Then you want a Dragon Rage and rank 1 Fire Breath. Then you want a Shattering Star and Disintegrate into an Eternity Surge and disintegrate until you're out. Then you want to use your Living Flames if you have a proc. If you do not have an instant Living Flame, then you would use a Sure Strike instead to generate guaranteed Essence Burst. Then you want to tip the scales into your last Flame Breath. And basically you just want to get in as many disintegrates as you can. You can clip these at the third tick and the last tick would carry over. And that's your very simplified opener. There are a lot of things you can do to optimize this, like weaving in your instant cast Living Flames. And there are certain conditions around iridescence and when to use it optimally so that you don't lose out on damage during your opener and everything else like that. It is important to mention that during Dragon Rage, when you use an Empower spell, even if you haven't fully empowered it, you will extend the duration of your Dragon Rage, and that's kind of what you want to be going through. You will try to extend Dragon Rage as much as possible. I will link a guide for the specific extended opener down below. It's very similar to the current simplified version that I've provided here. However, as I mentioned, there are some ways that you can optimize certain parts of your opener to get a bit more damage. However, overall, it shouldn't be that much of a difference, if that makes sense. Now, the AoE section of Devastation is a bit more complicated. However, the general rule of thumb is at Fire Breath, you will be using at rank 1 for 1 target, rank 2 for 2 targets, and rank 3 if 3 or more targets. In Dragon Rage, you will be using it as a rank 1 simply because you only want to extend it because you want to be firing off more Pyres. Similarly, with Eternity Surge, you only want to do a rank 1 during Dragon Rage. However, for 3 or 4 targets, you want to hold it for rank 2 outside of Dragon Rage, and for 5 and 6 targets, you want to use it at rank 3 outside of Dragon Rage. If you have time to finish off a rank 2 or rank 3 cast of Eternity Surge during Dragon Rage, that's completely fine. Just make sure that you fire off Eternity Surge before Dragon Rage ends. You also have access to Deep Breath in AoE, which you will be using outside of Dragon Rage on 2 or more targets. It is technically fine to use it during Dragon Rage if it's a lot of low health targets and you will be killing them with your Deep Breath. In AoE at 3 or more targets, you will be using a Sure Strike over Living Flame unless you have an instant cast Living Flame. Now, you have this thing where the more targets you hit with Fire Breath, you will gain a stack, which makes Living Flame hit more targets. So if you have one of those stacks, it might sometimes be more efficient to save your Living Flame for the next pack. But in general, it's kind of similar to our single target where we just swap out Disintegrate for Pyre. Hence why we also remove the Power Nexus node and the Engulfing Blaze, as we will be casting less Living Flames and we don't need the additional essence to disintegrate. However, having Pyre 30% chance to explode twice is very powerful. So similar to single target, you want to be using your Dragon Rage on cooldown as much as possible, but there will be, of course, opportunities where it makes more sense or not. Outside of that, it's Empower your Fire Breath, usually to max rank, and then empowering Eternity Surge to max rank as well if you will hit enough targets. And then you basically just Pyre away, Pyre away, Pyre away. Then now I could use a Living Flame, but other than that I would be using a Sure Strikes because we have multiple targets. Then we can tip the scales into a new Fire Breath, stack up a new Eternity Surge, Fire Breath, Living Flame, Pyre, 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 and start spamming a Sure Strikes to get more Pyres in. And that's actually the general idea of it. You just want to be getting as many Pyres in as you can during your AoE. Once again, use Eternity Surge as much as possible, and remember to use your burnouts whenever they make sense to use, right? And that's basically how you do it. It's honestly not too complex, and you will be highly pressed to never have anything to press. And then, of course, you can always Deep Breath and deal a ludicrous amount of damage. But yeah, I think that was the general AoE portion. It's a very healthy spec design-wise, in my opinion. Simply because there's not a huge difference between your like a general M+ build, a more focus on AoE damage, and a general rating build. You do a lot of the same mechanics, so to speak. You're using the same resources, and overall you have a lot of options, you have a lot of utility, you're very tanky as a Devastation Evoker, and overall it's actually quite fun to play. However, there is one major issue that Devastation Evokers have, and that is the existence of augmentation. As long as augmentation is in this game, I have a hard time seeing Devastation unless very much far ahead in DPS. We'll never see any play in any higher end content. Because let me explain. In raid encounters, the first 20% of every raid boss rarely ever matters. It is pretty much always the last 20% that's the killer of most things. So basically you are very powerful in a phase or a part of a fight where it's not as important, while an augmentation evoker doesn't really lose any effectiveness over the duration of a fight. And just the fact that augmentation brings as much utility and survivability and increasing to like intellect, even might, you can really improve a lot overall. But yeah, Devastation is fun. There's a lot of nuances once you get into it that you can improve on. And that's pretty much all I had to say about it. So thanks for watching and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!